All right, welcome to a very special edition of Social Distillation, where Sam gets his first period. Something else entirely. Your submarine still with the internet is on location in the gym.
In the gym at my house. We are not 300 miles apart, and we're going to do a live eval here. So this will be a fitness oriented episode of Social Distillation. I think we're on 44-ish. All right. So I'm going to do a live eval of his what I do with my field sports and court sports to assess their risk for ACL tears, but also with the adult population, it gives you a good indicator of potential causes of low back pain as well as knee pain as we age. So what's good for the athlete is also good for aging as well when we're trying to keep the athlete healthy. I had him already warm up, and the things that are going to be different than what I would do with a client is I'm going to point out things as they happen with him versus normally I'd just be writing it down. Because you don't want to coach them too much during the eval because they'll already correct the behavior that you're looking for. You're looking for unconscious issues that might be coming along. So I'm going to point them out with him, but normally I just write it down and then talk about it after the eval with the client. So he's going to stand in this spot because I want to be able to see his feet and what his body is doing. And again, normally I'd be standing where the camera is because that's going to give me the angles I want. Now, I've worked with Heath before, so I know some of the things I'm going to see. So that I can stand a little bit at an angle and still get what I need. Yeah, we'll get started. Now, it's going to be exercises back to back to back to back to back because I actually want an element of fatigue because that's when people normally get hurt, is when they start getting tired and they start having compensation patterns for their fatigue and their movement. All right, so he's going to stand in between the cones facing the camera and rep out 10 bodyweight squats for me. Go as low as you're comfortable. All right, pretty decent mobility. He's got to turn his toes out quite a bit to get down there. All right, and then turn your back to the camera and do it again. All right. One thing I see is you see his ankle collapse. You see his ankle collapse a little bit as he goes down. So we have a little bit of a deficiency in mobility in his ankle, which is probably why he has to turn his feet out so much to get low. All right. Now everything else looked pretty good, but again, he's pretty experienced doing this. We didn't see anything break down. Now the next one, we got to bring out a box here. All right, and now you're going to do 10 step-ups on each leg. Keep your foot on the box, just rep it out. All right, so we can see it from the camera angle here. His knee collapsed in a little bit. Oh, he's corrected. See, this is why you don't coach him during, because he corrected it when I started pointing it out. So balance is okay, even though he kind of fell out of that last one. Now I'd be noting every balance check, how many times it happens. But we saw that initial collapse of the knee as he went. This one, he starts with that angle. So his toes pointed out, the knees pointed forward. So I will correct him on that one because that's a bad pattern. Anytime you're on a single leg, you want that knee and that toe to go in alignment. All right. And again, we're keeping this at a high pace because I do want some fatigue. And we kick it up a notch. You're going to do a single leg squat. Try not to touch that back foot down. Again, go as low as you're comfortable. 10 reps on each leg. Same where you did the step-ups. All right. Okay, see that knee pop out. Balance check. And I don't know if anybody remembers when we did the other fitness episode on the knees that he popped in again there. He is that's called a Trendelenburg gait, where you get up over the hip. Instead of the muscles doing the work, you stack the skeleton. A little better on this side. We didn't see it here, so he has that little bit of a shift to get his skeleton stacked, but he didn't have one thing I'm looking for, which is that foot coming behind. We call it corkscrew, so that's another compensation. The next one, single leg, hop. You're gonna squat, stick to each landing, and try not to balance check as much as possible. Yeah, we notice one balance check. There you go. And now you're starting to see that corkscrew when he puts a little speed in it. That foot shot way behind his leg that time. Here we go. Now again, it's supposed to be getting tired because I want to see this. Is this going to bring out any unconscious compensation patterns in your athlete? Even a good field athlete is going to get a little tired at this point. All right. The next one, front plank. Now, these are a minute, but we're not going to hold them a minute. We're just going to go through the demonstration. I'm going to show you some things. No, face the camera still, because what I think I'm going to see is going to come out better than that. That's good. All right, so I'm going to have them hold it for maybe just 20 to 30 seconds here. We got a little bit of excess curvature of the spine. That's not too bad. All right, now he's starting to do it. I'm going to have to exaggerate what you're doing here. He's starting to tilt a little bit to that side, so we see a compensation. And actually, his glutes started firing. You can't see that on the camera, but they started firing in a kind of a spastic state. So it was not a consistent hold. Right? All right, go ahead and switch to one side. So the next one will be a side plank. Again, this is where we see a lot with most people. He's got a decent angle. He's got a little bit of anterior tilt there, collapsing a little bit in the upper body. Again, he can hear me talking about this, but I would just be taking these notes. All right, again, we'd hold this one for a minute and then switch to the other side. All right. All right, he's starting to collapse backwards, which is actually in the same angle as he did in that front line. So we've got a little bit of a deficiency in that right oblique. All right, go ahead and relax. All right, so all of those things up the chain are going to contribute to all that movement that we saw in the ACL. So what I would call him, based on that movement, I would say he would be a moderate risk for an ACL therapy with one of my field athletes or core sport athletes. So you're talking someone who has a decent chance of having a non-contact injury of that knee, which means they didn't get hit by somebody, they didn't have somebody crash into their knee, they just landed funny and tried to run and ended up tearing that ACL. So we would definitely key in on that in his training, probably spend 3 days a week or so doing an ACL specific program to help shore up all that extra movement. And part of it is just making them aware of it. So if I made him aware of it, which we did during this video, and he still couldn't correct it, now we know it's a muscular deficiency versus I just didn't know I was doing it wrong. So we're looking for that unconscious pattern, but even though we made him conscious of it and he still couldn't correct it, that's actually a sign that we got a lot of work to do. And this is where you would see a lot of that band work, putting ankle bands on, knee bands on to correct it. Now, we want to go over an exercise today called single leg RDL. We had teased it before because this is an exercise he has problems with. And I wanted to do that ACL evaluation because the problems that show up there are going to be the same problems that are getting in the way of his exercise. I just noticed something. I hope the sound quality is good because the mic is not plugged in. So we're going to plug that in and hopefully everything is good because he just went through that whole eval. We should have better sound now.
Dub over it. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see if we have to dub over it. I guess it just is dependent on how good the mic on the computer is. Okay.
Something I want to point out before we go on is you mentioned what's good for the athlete, good for normal people, especially with the age. And I can attest to that directly because I can tell when I do it wrong, when I'm under a load. It doesn't bother me as much when I'm doing this body weight stuff, which is where I tend to do my single leg work because when I'm under a load, I've had to have this knee scoped. And when I start to lose that balance, when things start to wiggle here, I feel it immediately in the interior of my knee here.
Yeah.
So even if, oh, I'm not an athlete, I'm just trying to get in shape. Well, trying to get in shape, if you don't understand where your movement deficiencies are, you can set yourself way back.
Yeah, well, not only that, we're talking long-term injury too. So when we're on the field, that moment of what we showed you with the RG3 cut, see my toes going that way and my knees going that way, that moment is going to be a pop, you know, so it's going to put you out. But that moment over and over, think every step you take as a rep. So we're talking weight room, but we're talking also real life. Every step I take, if you're getting your 10,000 steps, 15,000 steps a day, that's a moment of stress on that part of the knee that's not supposed to be stressed in that direction, especially if you do a lot of stairs. I see this a lot with former ballet dancers and stuff. They walk down the stairs, but they got that duck foot and their knees always hurt after walking a bunch of stairs. But that kneecap is grinding up that interior side of that groove, and that wears down the cartilage on the inside of that kneecap. People think of the kneecap as a cap. It's not. It's got a triangular bottom, and it runs inside a groove inside your knee. And if it rubs on one side, it's going to keep rubbing at that cartilage until it's just worn away, and then you got bone on bone action. And that's going to, I mean, there's just at that point, there's really nothing you could do other than deal with the pain and take anti-inflammatories. So we want to get ahead of that, and we want that sliding in its groove properly so we don't get that extra wear and tear. It's going to wear and tear as we age anyways. Let's not help it along, right? So that moment, every time you take a step, is going to keep contributing to that. Not only that, as you get older and your legs get weaker, now it's going to happen greater and greater and greater intensity every step. So we want to get ahead of that. Now we're going to go over an exercise called the single leg Romanian deadlift, RDL. All right, so normal RDL, you're going to have both legs lowering the weight in front, and we're working on that hinge pattern. So keeping that flat back and hinging at the hips versus just bending over. Well, single leg, now, as it says, it's on one leg. So you're going to have your weight, and you're going to do that hinge pattern and then bring it back up. Now I'm going to give you a front view, if I can borrow your spot here, because I want you to watch, there's the camera, I want you to watch my hips. My hips stay in line with the ground. What we're probably going to see where people go wrong is they pop that up to stack the skeleton because they can't keep their hips flat. They're not strong enough to keep their hips flat without falling over. All right, so let's see what you're doing already.
Let's start with the gimpy knee.
Start with the gimpy knee. All right, not bad. See, watch his. Let me get on the other side. Watch the bobble in his knee. All right. Good. See how it's kind of hopping in. Try it without the weight. Reach without the weight. Yeah. Okay, so we did that eval. This was the one that corkscrewed, or this is the one?
This is one of the corkscrews the most.
Yeah. So this was hard. Do one on the other side. Not bad, a little bit.
The deeper I go, the more pronounced it is. That's why I'm going
Yeah.
deeper than I might if I'm doing these.
Do that with load. Okay, not too bad. So this one's not too bad. The other side needed a little bit of work. And I think part of it's just a balance issue, right? So we've got three parts of balance. We've got inner ear, we've got our proprioceptive space, and then we've also got the strength in the muscles. So there might be a combination of it here. I doubt it's too much weakness because we do work on that a lot in our programming. So there's a little bit of deficiency in his ankle. If his foot wants to turn out because it's not mobile enough, then that's going to affect his balance, because this shuts off the external rotation because they're just short. The muscles are shortened. So if you're already standing like this, you're putting yourself with a deficiency and making it harder to prevent that.
When I lay down, my right foot immediately flops out to 90 degrees.
Yeah. So, well, part of it might be from history too, because you used to dance, right? Yeah. So he did ballet. Was it when you were in Germany or? Yeah.
So we got a little bit of history there that these habits that you build as you're young kind of stick with you for a long time. We talked about that when we talked about obesity before. So I think part of it will be a conscious effort to keep that in mind. Now, if it's locking up and it feels like it's locking up, then we'll need to do some ankle mobility work. For him though, with the balance, what I usually start my comments with is get him near a rack. So this is the hand I'm reaching with. So I'll keep this one near the rack and then I'll reach down. And if I have to, I'll grab onto that, all right? Now, again, you want to wean off of it as much as possible to where you're doing it without the rack. But at the same time, that's a good start. Points of contact. People think balance training is throwing somebody on a half ball and saying, we're gonna work on balance, but they can't even stand on it without being all over the place. I just created a bunch of compensation patterns with my athlete who can't do it without moving. So that's a big step. We want to get there eventually. Just don't start them there. Start them near a rack and give them a safety, a training wheel. All right, so I'm reaching, I can stop myself until they develop a pattern where they can go through that motion without all of that extra movement. Because every rep that you have extra movement is rep you're doing damage, right? You want to say anything about that before we go on?
Nope.
Well, I guess I should have gave the basic cues for single leg RDL.
Oh, well, I will say, a lot of fitness professionals will rant about machines and things like the Smith machine. Brett Contreras has done a number of videos on the Smith machine about how if you know how it moves and how the body is supposed to move, you can use it to your benefit. My single leg RDL is better than it was when I was first complaining about it on our podcast months ago, because the gym I go to do my own work has Smith machines, and I used those as my balance assist doing single leg RDLs. So if you have a machine that can give you an assist while you need it, understanding that what you want to do is start to progress beyond that.
Yeah, so we don't want to get dependent on the machines, but also we don't want to try to move too fast. So again, balancing on the Bosu is great, but if you can't even hold your balance on one foot for an extended period of time, then I'm actually going to do more damage than I'm helping with by putting you on that. So we're going to get to where we're solid on the ground first. Now, even going back, if someone has serious balance issues, and I've identified this up in the core, like we did with the plank there, where he had that deficiency in his right oblique, we're going to actually start with 4 points of contact, and then 2, and then back, right? So if they can't move their body under control, then we know that we've got a core deficiency, whether it's in the shoulders, abs, low back, hips, whatever. So we might even start with 4 points of contact and even just doing a hand raise or a foot raise from there. So we might even start all the way down and then work our way back up to where we're on one foot, even on the ball of the foot, right? Yeah, that's single leg RDL. If you can't keep your hips level or stay standing, use a rack. Use a rack, keep those hips level, monitor your knees, and then from there, just progress with the weight or the reps.
Progression. That is very important and something I don't see enough, whether it's people working out on their own or professionals training people, and they just start them off with all these crazy things, bands connected everywhere, imbalance, and if you can't do the basic movement, why are you adding complication? So remember back in the early summer, I showed some pictures of wonky knees. That was helping a brother and a sister who had wonky knees, and we were trying to work on it. And the Bosu is a good example of where people want to jump right on and say, yeah, imbalance, this is great. No, so to work on that balance, I had them doing active rest when we were working upper body. So we would do some dips as our working sets for upper body, and then as active rest, I would have them balanced. All right, well, she could do it on the Bosu ball. He couldn't.
Mhm.
He was way too wobbly on the Bosu ball, so now get down on the floor near the wall so you can touch if you need to brace yourself, and we'll work up to it.
Well, there's even steps in between. I mean, you cheap gold gym balance this. This is a lot easier than that Bosu ball to balance on, even though it is more challenging than just the flat ground. Now, with the hips, we talk about being a mobile joint, and we just talked about how to lock them in place and strengthen them a little bit, but you actually want to progress to where you have that mobility as well, in that external, internal rotation. The problem is you got to start with the stability, because when we talk mobility, it's different than flexibility. Mobility is being able to move in space when I want to move in space, versus flexibility, it can go in that space and it may do it whether you want to or not. Like this is movement, but we don't want that, right? So now I've progressed where I can control this all the way down and hold it. Now I can start adding the movement to that. Now I can mobilize that joint in a position as much as my balance will tolerate. So movement when you want to is different than just being able to move. If your problem is stiffness, we will do some stretching. But if your problem is stable from the beginning, which we looked at the eval, we want to shore that up before we add movement, because then we'll just be adding movement to this dysfunction and creating a situation where you're getting further into that dysfunction. But yeah, this is the approach that we would take to eliminate those knee, and again, everything works up the chain. So for a lot of us adults, back problems as well. Anything you want to add to that? All right, I'm going to check the sound on this and make sure we don't have to do the first part again, hopefully. And then we might come back and do a sit down as well, because there's a topic I wanted to talk about that's related to this that kind of has been bothering me. I think people forget how much science is in the exercise field, because I heard some discussions with some people I follow online. John McWhorter was one of them, and then the Weinsteins, Heather Heying and Brett Weinstein. We're talking about exercise, and they actually are as good a scientists as they are. They were kind of clueless about the exercise industry. So I did want to kind of dive into that a little bit. All right. Hopefully this sounds good. We'll see you in about however long it takes for the clip to go to the next part of this session.
And we are back, and as true fitness professionals, we have a drink to continue this conversation. I did check the sound quality. It's not great on the other one from the beginning, but it's good enough. We'll deal with it. Are we supposed to look at the camera? I don't know. We're amateurs, guys, so if we're not looking you in the eye, sorry. So we just went over the single leg RDL, a little evaluation on the knee and low back, and we kind of discussed where we wanted to go with this. And I think we were talking about motor patterns, and he brought up a good quote from a guy we follow, Eric Cressy. If you want to go ahead and bring that up, and then I'll fill in the blanks.
Oh, well, he had a post right before the holidays started of if your kid just got cut from a select team, be thankful that he now gets to spend time relaxing with family during the holidays and not with somebody who thinks it's okay to cut a 9-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why what we were just talking about with the RDLs is why we rant so much about single sport selection so young, because you get into movement patterns that aren't necessarily healthy when you're doing a sport, especially baseball, because throwing is such a bizarre motion mechanically.
Yeah, throwing a baseball is not a natural motion. It's very specific to the sport, and when you do it over and over and over and over again, everything you do is a rep. And so if you're over patterning something, even normal movements, if you over pattern them, you're going to set yourself up for some sort of injury. But doing something at such a high force, like throwing a baseball in an unnatural motor pattern, is a recipe for it. And that's why you're seeing 12-year-olds having rotator cuff surgery, which no 12-year-old should have to go through that unless they had a traumatic injury like a car accident or something. I mean, you really want to look at how robust the human body is in a child. Watch them on the monkey bars. You know, they're doing all this stuff. There's nothing I can do in the weight room that's as stressful as what they do on the monkey bars or playing around, wrestling around with each other. But at the same time, I can do something lighter than that too much in a repetitive way. Now back to our other discussion on the single leg RDLs, as well as the evaluation. Every rep we do with our athletes can contribute to that over patterning of a bad behavior. Now I did the eval and specifically tried to uncover those. But once I've done that, I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that they never do it again. So if they give me a bad rep like that, I'm going to pull back on the weight, or I'm going to give them the extra balance apparatus or something. So just making somebody struggle through the exercise is very rarely the right thing to do.
Yeah. For instance, I used to do heavy Bulgarian squats quite often. It was a regular part of my routine for anterior leg day. I like them. I like the hip mobility it gives you. I like the focus you get on that one quad. I don't do them anymore. I only do them light as part of mobility work because the juice ain't worth the squeeze with how my knee reacts. So I can't, it's not worth the risk. I'm better off just doing high bar and front squats and then working that single leg stuff to try to get those movement patterns back that I've lost.
Yeah, and every, the saying is, and this is overkill a little bit, but it's a good philosophy to live by. Every bad rep you do has to be reinforced by 10 more good reps. So if you're doing even a basic exercise like we did in the eval, step up with weights, and your knee drives in, you better pattern about 10 or 15 good ones to make up for that. Now, this is one of my problems with the CrossFit model. The CrossFit model, everything is to fatigue. Everything is to failure, unless you got a great coach that isn't doing headquarters CrossFit. They're doing their own thing. They just have a CrossFit shingle. So, but the CrossFit model, where everything is done to fatigue, everything is novel, everything is random. If you've got 15 deadlifts to do, and rep 3, your back starts caving in on you, but you have a prescribed weight, 135 for male, a lot of times for 15 reps. But on rep 3, you're losing position and you rep out those other 12. You have just done 12 reps of damage to your body that may or may not be able to be made up later. I always say when it comes to fitness, as far as how you look and how strong you get or whatever, CrossFit works if you live through it. And it's one of those models where very few people live through it, but the people who do get badass. So they get to the headline, they get to be the spokespeople for Rich Froning and what's that? The gal's name.
I haven't paid attention to it in so long, I'm drawing a blank.
Yeah. So we look at the CrossFit Games, basically, is the point, and we think that's what CrossFit does. Mm-hmm. But it's not. Those people, first of all, live through it. And then if you actually listen to their coaches, Rich Froning has his own podcast and he talks about coaching. Cashew, he's out of Austin. He was a former champion and he does his own coaching. If you listen to these coaches, they're genius coaches. They don't do random jacked up finisher workouts every time they do it. They'll do it for YouTube every once in a while to show how badass they are and to spread the name, but they actually have very complex, genius fitness protocols. In fact, Rich Froning, the original CrossFit Games champion, the reason why he was the original CrossFit Games champion is because he was a strength coach. And he knew what he was doing, and he did that and adapted it to the CrossFit Games, whereas everybody else were in the beginning were just CrossFitters who were badass. So he was able to use the science of strength and conditioning to make himself better than those other people that were just doing CrossFit and happened to be naturally gifted. So there's some of the best people to learn from, because you're taking people to be good at something that is inherently damaging to the body, and making them really good at it to where they can live through the process and get really good at it. And it's to me, it's a big lie.
Early this year, sometime, I don't know if I shared this with you, Brett Contreras did a video that I thought was a good rule of thumb. And he made it clear this is a rule of thumb, right? But he has a rule of thirds. So when it comes to programming, he, generally speaking, about a third of the time you're doing a bilateral movement, about a third of the time you're doing a unilateral movement, and then about a third of the time you're adding motion into that. So like for quad day, for leg day, you'll be doing squats, and then you may do some Bulgarians to do some single leg movement, and then to put some different planes of motion in it, you do some side lunges, crossover squats, that kind of thing. He also follows that when it comes to reps. So I thought of this because you were talking about the going to fatigue all the time, and he says, look, that's overdoing it. So about a third of the time he will do that. He will push himself and his clients to fatigue. But then about a third of the time you drop it down and you're doing lower rep, higher weight, because you want to get some strength movement in there. And then about a third of the time he says, I'll say fatigue, but what I really mean is kind of fatigue. Like, true fatigue is I can't push out another rep. My muscles have failed. But sometimes you get to that point where you think, yeah, I could probably do 3, maybe 4 more reps, but this is a good place to stop.
Well, what we strive for is what we call technical failure. So take a basic movement like a push-up. So I'm doing straight up push-ups. I've got a good plank. If I can have the mobility, I'm tapping my chest to the ground. I'm going through it. So how many can I do without adding extra movement or elbows flaring out or kipping up with the hips instead of just pressing myself out? So how many can I do with good technique is a lot different, is what we strive for. So if I rep out one bad rep at the end because of fatigue, I'm cool with that, because maybe I just misjudged my own ability, and it's okay. But you want to hit that every once in a while, or sometimes you're not just challenging yourself or your client, but at the same time, if I do that halfway through the set, well, then I'm just ego lifted at that point. So there's a big difference. I love working with people one-on-one, and I hate online training for this reason, because I can organically work with that. If I see them jacking up halfway through, then we've done too much. That might not be their day, or maybe I've miscalculated what they should be doing. But online, I don't have that organic ability to adjust on the fly or to evaluate on the fly. Now I know I got to keep up with the times, and this is probably the next step in trying to make money and be a professional. I need to get virtual, but I don't know. It's just so tough for me, because I don't know if you've experienced this with clients, but especially group classes. I have some groups that are about 3 or 4 people. Is you look them in the eye, you tell them what they're going to do, you show them what they're doing, and then you watch them with the first few, and they do something completely different. After you've told them, shown them, and it's something we've done a million times already, and it's something completely different. I remember when we had the lockdown, 2 weeks to slow the spread. Well, we had 6 weeks here in Texas, and so I sent them home with programs, and I tried to make it as simple as possible with the terminology we always use, some videos of maybe more complex movements. And we all met in the park about week 4. And we met out there and just kind of go over what they were doing to make sure everybody's doing the right thing. And there was one stretch that I had in the program, and I'm gonna show you that it's a kneeling adductor stretch. So this is your adductor, groin muscle, right? So you're kneeling, this out to the side, and you push the hip forward, so you're getting the adductor here and the hip mobility there. So we've done this a million times. We do it all the time. We do forward, we do angles, and it was in their program there. So we all got to there and they were all, what's the kneeling adductor stretch? And I showed them and they're like, oh man, 5 people were doing 5 different things and not a single one of them was kneeling. In the name of the stretch was kneeling adductor stretch. So 5 different things came out of that. It's like that telephone game where you say something and it goes around the room and something else pops out the other side, and not a single one of them was kneeling. Now, these are 5 people that are highly functional in their careers and in their daily life, all got something wrong and in the worst way. So that's what, it didn't give me confidence doing online training and putting my name and my stamp on.
Well, what I found I need to do is if I'm gonna write something down and give it to someone, I do some searching first, so that and even if it's not what I usually call a movement, I will write it down as what you need to search in Google for it to pop up as the first thing.
Oh, yeah. Well, I will be putting some stuff on another channel. I have another YouTube channel that is specific to my business, and I'm gonna start using it again. I had to stop for a while when I consolidated everything to the garage because there's rules around the HOA and zoning on what I can do, and it looked like I was advertising a gym. I can't advertise a gym. I can just advertise my training, so I have to rework everything. But yeah, so hopefully I'll link that once I get it all put together. We're learning this whole setup tech stuff, so I do want a good product, but at the same time, I know I got to get on the virtual part. But
You said something that about the challenges of training virtually. You were talking about being able to adjust someone as they move, and it made me think of something that I've seen you do and I got from you, and I feel confident is one of the something I can brag about professionally, that I do this, and you need to, if you're looking for a trainer, you need to find someone who does this. And we've talked about this before, about the trainer that's just trying to kill you. So your mark is 12 reps, and come on, 4 more, give it, you have that trainer that's just yelling at you to get those 12 reps no matter what you look like, or our mark is 12 reps, but with the weight I've got on, I can see you're not going to make it. And so, all right, just give me 2 more, just make it to 8, whatever it is. And then either that's our new rep mark, or we take the weight off and then we try to get to 12 on the next one.
Well, part of the problem is some people, because of the way things have been marketed in the past when it comes to fitness, people think they need that. And it was great the first season it was out, because it did bring awareness to a good thing, which was handling obesity was the biggest loser.
Yeah.
Season 1 was great. The problem is they did exactly what CrossFit did. CrossFit original model was great because it was fundamentals and basics, nutrition, base
focus
strength
on lifestyle change too.
Yeah,
that first season.
Yeah, base strength, and then they worked up the pyramid, and then fun and sport and everything was the top of the pyramid after you developed the fundamental base. Well, the first season of Biggest Loser was that way too. They showed them walking for an hour a day. They showed the nutrition changes, and it wasn't just marketing. They did have some product placement, but it wasn't just marketing in that first season. It was, hey, you're 450 pounds and you eat a salt lick a day of sodium. Let's make these changes. How do we introduce lean proteins? How do we introduce vegetables into someone's life? But then they notice that, of course, they're following the ratings. They're following the ratings, and then the last chance workouts were popular. It's
much more compelling TV to see someone who's 5'6", 350 pounds work out until they fall down and throw up.
Yeah, the the person who lost 15 pounds in a week was popular. So they took everything that was popular and said, we're going to do that from now on and showcase that. Well, last chance workouts are cool and they're good every once in a while because you want a mental challenge sometimes when you're working out, but they're the smallest part of your everyday routine. I'll do a week every 4 or 5 weeks where I do some of that kind of stuff with my long-term clients, because we'll compare it to the last 6 weeks, after we've built for a while. But it's not an everyday thing. It's not what you need every day. In fact, sometimes you come out of a workout and you say, I actually feel more energized than when I went in, and that's good. They can go about the rest of your day and be energetic. If I leave you so torn up from, like we talked about a leg day, a leg exercise workout, that you can't walk up the stairs later, and you neglect to walk up the stairs when you normally would have 4 or 5 times that day, I had a negative effect on your daily caloric output, right? So this is where your well-meaning coaches that aren't experienced, or your jackasses that just want to be the cool coach, or actually there's ego lifting and then there's ego coaching. Some of these coaches want to be the hardest coach you've ever had. We got a guy in the area that has a nickname with the local clinicians because he sends so many clients their way, because he hurts their shoulders, he hurts their backs, he hurts their knees, because he's got his alpha male workouts that he puts a 68-year-old dude through right next to a 23-year-old guy. It's not good. It's his ego that he's looking for, not the actual benefit to the client. Some of them live through it and some of them get good results and they put them on the front page of their advertisement. But yeah, it's part of the marketing. Clients think they need that, and it's actually tough to make money when you provide something different that's a more long-term approach.
This makes me think of something I've been wanting to talk about. I was thinking about this in terms of dieting, and I had kind of a light bulb moment. Strict does not mean severe. So if I tell you, because say we've talked about this situation before, you're someone who is overweight and you need an elective surgery, we say elective because it's not life-saving, but it's really important for you. Mm-hmm. But the surgeon's not going to do it until you lose weight, because there are all kinds of complications with anesthesia and other things when you're overweight. Well, I'm going to tell you, all right, well, the first thing you need to do is track your calories, and you need to be strict about it. You need to track everything that comes into your mouth. Okay. And then you need to set up your diet plan, your caloric intake accordingly, and slowly drop it off. And you need to be strict about that. Strict does not mean severe. That doesn't mean you go out and put yourself on a 1,000-calorie diet when you're probably eating 4,000 calories a day right now. Okay. That's not good for you physically. And it's definitely not good for you mentally. So you're not going to stick with it. It just means that what the plan you set up for yourself, the plan that you can live with and follow, you need to follow it. You need to follow it strictly. If part of your plan is you're supposed to work out Monday, Wednesday, Friday, then by golly, you need to work out Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Mm-hmm. Now those workouts don't have to kill you. You just need to make sure you do them.
Well, not only that, we take into all the variables with it, right? So when we look at what time of day are you working? I mean, if I just completely smash somebody at 5 a.m, what's the rest of their day going to look like? Versus, or we go to the other side. If I get you redlining at 7 p.m, how well are you going to sleep? So all of these things play into it, and that's why we got to. It's just like we talk about with politics, with Wheel of Time, with everything we do. We got to get out of these binaries where I'm killing somebody or it's not a workout, right? I can't remember who the original quote was, but a client of mine brought this to me, and it's one of my mantras from here on out: is, have we created lasting positive change? Did I change your body in a way that is positive, and will it last? That's the real fitness motto. And I'll I'll have to ask the guy where he got the original quote from so I can give credit. But this client, he was a former CrossFitter, and he came in because he had ripped his quad away from his patella. So you got your kneecap here, all 4 quad muscles attached to it. And I think it was 3 of the 4 he had actually ripped away from the kneecap, which the kneecap allows for this movement because it runs through that groove and creates a lever on the other side. So normally people would tear the patella tendon, but he had torn the quad away. So he had had that repaired, gone through the rehab process, and was looking for a gym that was similar to CrossFit, but in style, because he liked that style, but was more intelligently designed. And this was, he's a genius in his own right. He's a chemical engineer for a company here that makes something that I'm not supposed to know they make because it's deadly. But we did a fitness I guess presentation at his work, so that's the only reason I know what they make there. He didn't tell me himself, but I was actually in the facility. They make deadly chemicals that can be used in warfare. But yeah, he's a genius in his own right, but he poured that genius into his study of fitness too, and he realized CrossFit wasn't a good model because it was too random. Randomness has nothing to do with it, and that's why he tore his quad. What he did was a day where he was basically crushing his legs, and then the next day was random, so he's crushing his legs again, and then he did competition, and he tore it in competition where he was front squatting to failure basically, which for those that don't know, a front squat, the weight's in the front, that puts more pressure on your quads than on the glutes and the hamstrings, which is why we program it, because we can go back and forth from the butt and the quads if we're looking for extra volume. Well, he was crushing those in competition, so he was hyped up and everything. Just like when I tore my pec, I was hyped up because I was training with these big giant football guys and trying to keep up when I'm only 200 pounds and they're 320 pounds. But he was hyped up, and that muscle had just been hammered day after day after day with no healing time, and it just ripped away. So he came to me with that, and we talked about the science behind everything, and he picked my brain. He challenged me as a new client. He picked my brain on all the stuff he had read and what we should be doing, and 2 years, a year and a half later, we did a CrossFit competition together. And him, one of my young firefighters, myself, and a gal that I had working for me, and well, there was 6 of us. So the gal I had working for me and the client's wife were one pair. It was a pair competition. So 2 people working together trying to win. Him and the firefighter, and me and another guy who was 60 years old that I'd worked with on occasion. He was more of a marathon runner, but I'd worked with him on his knee rehab and everything. We were partners because, hey, us old guys are going to go through it. I'm 40, you're 60, and we're going to go in with all these young kids. Now, the 2 the firefighter and the engineer, they were 24 and 25, so they were our young kids. Well, we go into this CrossFit competition, and we did one kind of practice run through leading up to it, just to kind of get how we would trade off reps and everything. And me and my 60-year-old partner scored in the top quarter. My 2 girls scored in the top quarter, and my 2 young guys, including the guy who had ripped his leg open, won the whole damn thing. So this is the difference between just randomly crushing everything and taking a systematic approach. We took a guy who was a year and a half out of ripping his muscles away from his kneecap to winning a CrossFit competition. And a 60-year-old typically marathon runner who doesn't try to place in marathons, he just does them for fun. And cardiac baby alcoholic over here got in the top quarter. And then 2 young gals, well, one of them was my age, but one of them had just started working out when her husband brought her in to my gym. So it was a year and a half of training, and they were in the top quarter. So, and that's all sexes. There was no breakup with gender in this competition. So that was everybody. But it was pretty cool. But yeah, systematic approaches that I think people don't get the nuance of it. Actually, this is why I wanted to have this conversation, because we were talking about the science of strength and conditioning. People don't realize how much literature there is actually in this industry. You see Nike commercials and you see CrossFit and you see Biggest Loser, but there's a lot behind it, and it comes from different places that you wouldn't think it came from. Like we know so much about bone density because of trying to keep our astronauts from losing their bone when they go into orbit because of lack of gravity. And that was actually my specialty before I started my own business, which is where I was going out of grad school. Was I was working with NASA on some biomechanics research, but I was going into their bone density research division when Obama cut the funding to NASA. So that ended up changing the trajectory of my career. And then by the time everybody was hiring again, I was making more money training than I could make in the lab. So, but yeah, I think people forget how in depth a lot of the research is.
I don't know if you remember, but the first program you ever wrote for me to try and help rehab my back and my neck. And I asked you, not snarkily, but you had just started to kind of grumble about CrossFit because this was like right after it had hit it big.
Well, let me add a disclaimer to what he's going to say. When I originally got into training, I was a CrossFitter. When I went to school to finish my degree in physiology, I was a CrossFitter, and then I got into this program where I started working with the actual nerds behind exercise science, and that converted me. So go ahead.
Yeah. So on its surface, the program you wrote for me kind of looked like if you were looking at a CrossFit gym, people working out, and then you look at me over here doing your thing, and it's like, how is this not CrossFit? Because I heard you start grumbling about CrossFit already. And so I wasn't being snarky, but I wanted to know what's the difference here? What makes this something that is problematic at best or downright bad? And then what you wrote, how is it different? And basically what you said is kind of what you were just talking about, which is what he had written was not random. It looked random if you didn't know what was going on because it was total body every day. So it's like, well, I'm just doing a little bit of everything every day. No, it was specifically calibrated for what I could do and what I needed to do. It was also had built-in adjustment, built-in improvements and steps up. We talked about progression when we were doing the RDL. You had built in a progression of, okay, well, you're doing this here because we're going to work on your balance, because in the next phase, I want you to start loading, some Bulgarians or whatever it was. I can't remember the workout so long ago, but that was the whole point, is focus on what needs to be built as a foundation, knowing that we're not just going to do something random next time. We're not just going to wing it. No, we're going to do something specific to build on this.
Okay, so I went to CrossFit homepage because I thought I knew what I was going to see. I guess they've changed it since then. But part of their bullet points before was life is random, so should your workouts be, all of that. That's what I was going to bring up. But I just noticed something here as we pulled it up. CrossFit went woke. Inclusion. Okay, so does anybody in the audience know the story behind the head of CrossFit and what happened after George Floyd?
Yeah, I remember something about, he basically just said, look, we're a fitness company. That's what we focus on. This isn't we're a fitness company. We want to focus on what we do and do it well. We're not an activist organization.
Now here's the power of activism. He wanted to stay out of it, right? Now, Glassman was He's an alcoholic. He was. I mean, as some of us are. I'm not going to judge him for that, but he let it get in the way sometimes because he was also a genius. He was also an asshole. I met him once at a conference, a physiology conference, and he was one of the speakers there. And I'll go into that in a little bit more detail, but overall he was an asshole, and I can see why people didn't really like him. But he did take what I thought would be the correct approach as someone who's not going to give into activism, but at the same time, he tried to stay out of it. He's like, hey, we're a fitness company. We're not going to even comment on this, but people kept pressuring him. Well, he's an alcoholic asshole. So you pressure somebody like that for too long, they're eventually going to react to that. And he made a tweet, one word tweet that ended his career with CrossFit. And he tweeted Floyd 19. So everything that was going on that year, he had tweeted, he had made it all one thing, Floyd 19. So it was after George Floyd, and it was during COVID-19 lockdowns. And that tweet he had to resign as the head CEO, president of CrossFit, where he was one of the original 3 that brought it up. But CrossFit affiliates all over the country were dropping his franchise. So he had to resign just to kind of do damage control, I guess. But now we saw, as I shared screen there, this is the power of activism. What was the response to that? To include this DEI kind of mantra, and whether it's Wheel of Time, whether it's CrossFit, whether it's your local university, whether it's, we'll go to the American Medical Association, whether it's our healthcare system. Everybody is bowing down to this because of the political power that is there. So, and like we talk about anything where you put something ahead of the performance, you're going to have a diluted result, and it includes fitness. How do we go down that road? Randomness, CrossFit. Okay, yeah, because we'll get back on topic here as we tangent. Try to. We were talking about randomness and programming, as he was talking about. Mine looked like CrossFit, but it wasn't, because everything was put together in a way that we could do a progression model versus just throwing something at you and hoping you get better. What I went to the site for was because they actually used to have that in the first page about us, but yeah, a lot of good concepts, but randomness should have nothing to do with your programming. Life is random, so therefore you should control the things you can, especially when you're walking that tightrope with training of stressing your body in a way that'll become better out of it versus getting hurt. If you cross that line, you end up with an injury. If you do it too much, which is a concept called overtraining, right? Where you all of a sudden can't sleep, you lose your appetite, your body starts breaking down, you're probably going to develop tendonitis in certain places, depending on what you're stressing more. So there's a wealth of literature on what exactly we need to be doing. And it kind of hit me that 2 of the people I follow that are very intelligent people, or 3 of the people, because 2 of them have podcasts together, had no clue about the science, that there was actually this science behind exercise. John McWhorter, I give a little bit of a break too, because he's a linguist,
Yeah, he's a humanities guy.
And he was asked by the trigonometry guys why, what is something that we're not talking about that we should be, and he was talking about obesity, and he said, why aren't we doing more to figure out how to combat this? Yeah. Because it's not people's fault. Some people just have things that make them obese. And I was like, well, it's a nuanced conversation there, buddy. But then I was listening to the Dark Horse podcast with Brett and Heather, and they're evolutionary biologists, and they were talking about exercise, and they prefer obviously going out into nature and getting their activity that way. And this is where it kind of upset me, because they kind of poo-pooed on any weight room activity or any regular fitness, what we call fitness kind of thing. And I was like, no, there's a huge wealth of data that proves that this is actually a good thing. And this brings me to my grandfather. My grandfather was an old farmer. He was a carpenter up until he was 65. He retired and he farmed till he was 98 and died. So he started doing a job too hard for most people right now when he was 65 years old. And he was on his deathbed, which in the last 3 weeks of his life, he went from walking around farming to in a wheelchair to dead, basically. And he said, he asked me this question all the time. He said, what do you do in that gym of yours? And I never could answer it till this one time. And it was the last conversation I had with him, which is awesome that we had this moment right before he passed away at the ripe old age of 98. And I said, Grandpa, and I was seeing him deteriorate, and I knew the quickness of his deterioration once he was in that wheelchair. He had fallen and hit his head. So he had fallen and hit his head, and he was in the wheelchair, and then his body just went, it aged 100 years in 3 weeks. And I said, all those things you did on the farm that kept you active and healthy for 98 years, people don't do that anymore. So I've got to figure out how to fit all of that work into 3 hours a week to keep people healthy. And that takes a lot of science, because what you're doing 60 hours a week needs to be fit into 3 without hurting somebody, and they benefit from it. And he said, wow, that actually makes sense. And that was the last conversation we had. And I'm glad we had it, because it not only validates what I do, but it was a great moment with someone I love dearly, because my grandfather's one of the biggest influences of my entire life on just being a man.
As grandfather should be.
Yeah.
It reminds me of my greatest moment of professional pride. So I haven't worked with nearly as many people as you have, but I have worked with a Hooters bikini model, a kid who was trying to get into the minors as a catcher, a kid who was on his way to a D1 school to play football. But my greatest achievement professionally was with a guy who was 72 years old, had had bypass surgery and had a pacemaker. Okay. And where I think I texted you when this happened, because I was so ecstatic about it, is about the last time I trained him, I'd been working with him for like 2 months. And the last time I trained him, he was able to get up on a ham glute device, knock out 10 reps, and step down without any assistance.
That's good. Yeah. Well, especially with the underlying thing that I don't know if you accounted for it or not, but a glute ham device, you're horizontal on this thing. It's kind of like people see the Roman chair where you do your back extensions, but you're further out. So this is the device. This is my hip bones, and this is my upper body. And you're going all the way down and then rotating back up as far as you can. So where the back extension, you'd be doing something like this. This is the hip, all right? So look where my head just ended up. And we're talking about someone with a heart condition. Think of the blood pressure in his head at that point. And he's able to do this for, you said 10 reps, without having a blood pressure incident, and able to get off on his own without having, so this is depth beyond the butt muscles he was working.
Exactly.
Right.
Which was the whole point. Is you talked about the application of what we do in here to life. Obviously, he's not going to make that movement out in his real life, but that's not the point. The point is,
well, he might reach down to grab something and go under his hips and then pick it up. And that's the same movement without a device.
It's going to mimic that movement, but no, I'm not doing, a glute hinge. I'm not doing a squat, but I am getting down and I have to get back up. And the more strength I have in my legs, the easier it's going to be for me to do that unassisted. All right, because when we first started out, my arm was always here when I was doing stuff with him, because he needed that. I needed to be there just in case he lost his balance, just in case his blood pressure got a little wonky and he got a little lightheaded. Okay. The whole point of what we were doing was, one, to work on those muscles that we were talking about when I was doing the RDLs and shifting all over the place, work on those muscles so that you would have that muscular balance, but then also go through these motions that are challenging so that you would also have that proprioception. You would also work, on the heart and the blood pressure. That's the point here. So something you brought up earlier, and I just had to have this conversation, and it boggled my mind because this is a licensed massage therapist who's working on my jacked up neck for me, and I'm talking to her about what I do, and she asked about strength training for young people. Okay, and the reason was because she'd had a 15-year-old girl who was doing powerlifting in high school have to come in so that she could work on her shoulder. She's like, what in the world are they doing here? And I said, well, there's good and bad here. It's problematic if they're doing this, but there are benefits here. And she brought up the old canard of, doesn't that stunt your growth?
Okay, so again, people don't realize the science is behind our industry. The stunting your growth is a myth formed by confirmation bias. All right. So when we talk about stunting the growth, the big examples that come up, you brought up powerlifting, but the two main culprits are gymnastics and Olympic lifting. So the difference between Olympic lifting and powerlifting is kind of an interesting thing in its own right, because there's more power in Olympic lifting than there is in powerlifting, but that's a side point. Is the Olympic lifts are the clean, jerk, and snatch. So I don't have a bar set up behind me, but clean where you go to the shoulders and then pop overhead, that's clean and jerk, or the snatch where you go overhead in one motion. So if you watch the Olympics, watch the weightlifters, those are the Olympic lifts. Powerlifting is bench, squat, deadlift. All right, so those three lifts brought together. Now we can go into the problematic parts of that for that specific person, but we're going to stick with the stunting growth. No, it does not stunt growth. This is a matter of correlation versus causation. So a lot of people look at Olympic lifters and gymnasts and say these are tiny people and their sport stunted their growth, versus what we look at is the people that get to that level already were predispositioned to be short and have a certain body type. Olympic lifting, if you've got long arms, a short torso, and short legs, you are going to be better at it because the weight only has to go so far. You don't have to squat as deep to get to the bar because you have long arms. So basically your elite level Olympic lifters in weight classes look like big babies. Right? Because they've got that short body, the stubby legs, and they got these long arms and a big head.
For the longest time, one of the best was a Turkish guy whose nickname was Pocket Hercules.
Pocket Hercules, first guy to do a triple body weight clean and jerk. Naeem, and I'm not even going to try to pronounce his last name because it's like 30 syllables. But Pocket Hercules but he also could do a standing backflip with no problem, because the correlation between vertical jump and Olympic lifting. But he was the first person to do a triple body weight clean and jerk. He was about 140 pounds, I think. So whatever kilo weight class that was. So 140 times 3 is a lot of weight for that little bitty guy. The smallest, when I was setting goals for myself, I looked at the female Olympic lifters, and the smallest weight class medalist clean and jerk what I could clean and jerk. And it was a little 90-pound Korean woman, South Korean woman, could clean and jerk what I could clean and jerk, and snatched more than I could. And
it's a hard lift.
It's a hard lift, but at the same time, I outweighed her by 110 pounds. But so the myth that it stunts your growth comes from two places. It's from looking at the elite level where they're shaped for it. They're already the right size for it.
I have a great firsthand account of this.
Well, let me go into the second part with gymnasts, and then we'll go into that, because the second part with gymnasts, there's another factor. First of all, most girls that do gymnastics get too tall and they go out of it and they end up doing dance or something along those lines. Cheerleaders typically are the elite level cheerleaders are gymnasts that got too tall and they're still short, right? Now, the other part of with gymnasts that skews the data is we're talking about a hormone profile at a young age in a female, right? So if your body fat's too low when you're going through adolescence, you're going to have growth issues. So it's not the resistance training or the pounding on the body that was the issue. It was the fact that they jacked their hormones up by being at a too low of a body fat percentage, which wouldn't be the case with your powerlifting because they're eating. They're eating to perform, where a gymnast is a lot of times starving themselves so they don't get too heavy. So we've got two factors with the gymnasts going, but your Olympic lifters, they're eating too. They're trying to get. It's actually again back to the science. Having a weight class lifter eat enough to recover from the work they're doing without going to another weight class. We both wrestled. And that was a science in itself. I had to gain weight one time, and I was having trouble gaining weight as fat as I can get sometimes, because we're about the same size. And so he was going to wrestle in the lighter one, and I had to go up a weight class because he was more experienced, and I was just kind of tagging along at that point with the family. But it was that was even hard, gaining weight without getting fat. So yeah, the weight class sports, the balance between nutrition and performance is very complicated, and I think people underestimate that. Okay, so now you can get into so I gave you the two reasons. It's confirmation bias by just what you see in the elite levels, and then the hormone profiles of gymnasts.
And here's what you don't see before they get up on the stage here. Is we talked when I was doing my RDLs about one of the places my imbalances come from is I did ballet for a while when I was in Germany, and then I did it again. Started doing it again for a bit in college. My ballet instructor in Germany, Miss Christie, her daughter was a great dancer. She was our lead in everything we did, and I think she was a year or two older than me at the time, so she would have been, I don't know, like a junior or senior in high school. And she went and tried out for, I believe it was the Stuttgart Ballet Company. The first thing they did was line up all the girls, and they didn't even have them dance. It was, you're too tall, you're this, you're that. They didn't even watch her dance, and they told her your hips are too wide, you can leave.
Oh, we can go back to Kaepernick. Remember, we were talking about he was part of the selection process that he was having trouble with was the fact that he was too skinny for college and NFL play, and that was part of his problem, not the other things he was attributing it to. He was smaller than me, a little bit taller, but at 20-ish pounds less weight. So now you can imagine how skinny he is. So he is about 2 inches taller than me, but 20 less pounds. He would have been looked frail. And that's part of the evaluation process. It's not some throwback to slavery or something. It's the fact that you're going to be playing a sport where these things matter. Just like in ballet, you have to have good lines from the audience. It's not how you look when I'm standing next to you. It's how do you look on stage? And how do you look next to the other people on stage? And if everybody's got a model and you're different than that, you're going to draw attention to you, and you might be a bit part. So it doesn't matter your talent at that point. There's this overall artwork that this producer is trying to make.
Right. So you're sitting here looking at professional ballet dancers and thinking, oh, ballet stunts your growth. It makes you short and skinny. No, they just threw out all the tall and
selection bias in research, right?
Wide hips. And keep in mind, wide hips means like
a normal girl.
Like a normal girl.
Yeah.
And again, she had been doing ballet her days.
I would have too wide hips, and as a normal guy, right? It's just, that's selection bias. So that's one of the reasons why randomized controlled trials are so important, because there is that randomization. We didn't already select out for what we wanted. unless we're studying for a specific thing in that population. We didn't select out for it and say, well, we're all going to get all healthy people to study this thing. Oh, this makes you healthy. Well, they were already healthy, right?
Yeah.
So we've got to get some people that are sedentary, some people that are exercise addicts, some people that are in between in order to justify our hypothesis when we come to a conclusion. So it's
And then the justification or the logic behind lifting will stunt your growth is supposedly damage to the growth plates.
now that is a concern. So the best time to start strength training with an athlete is specific strength training, not just general exercise, but specific strength training is right after their biggest growth spurt. So it's not the last growth spurt, it's the one where they change the most. So for females, it's around 12 to 13, and for males, it's around 14 to 16. So that where they shot up. After that, they can grow a little bit more, but at the same time, you can really get a lot of benefit from that. And part of it is because you're helping their muscles catch up to the bones. And the other part is they're going to get the biggest hormonal response to that. It's kind of their body saying, this is how I'm going to develop from here on out.
I don't know if you ever heard this when you were growing up, but I think this may have come from Tom House, was the Rangers pitching coach. We've talked about him before. That was where his system is where I learned to throw and pitch. And I think it was from him that my uncle got the idea that there's a shaving rule. If you're not shaving, you shouldn't be lifting.
Well, maybe as a mantra, as a generalization.
Where the general idea came from.
Yeah, no, because I mean, I can think of plenty of kids that I work with that, I mean, I didn't even need to really start shaving until I was 23, 24 years old. I was late to this party. So that, you gotta, now we gotta look back at genetics. What's your ethnicity? And, if you get somebody from an Arab descent, that starts really early.
A level of physical maturity does matter. It also matters what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So I have trained young kids. I had when I was working at a box gym, I had a family of 3, and I trained the husband, the wife, and their young kid, who was in middle school, but he looked like an elementary schooler.
Mm-hmm.
He was a little scrawny guy. I would put a dumbbell in his hand to give him some challenge and some resistance, but it was always light, and the focus wasn't the weight. The focus was giving you a challenge and making you do these movement patterns so your body can get used to moving, so you don't look so awkward when you're doing a walking lunge, because that awkward look is indicative of a bad movement pattern that you want to train out. You want to get your body used to moving so that later you can put some load on it and get your body's already used to moving. So now that load isn't as scary, isn't as dangerous, isn't as unique. It's something your body has done before. Now we're just escalating the challenge.
Now, working with the youth, I don't do a whole lot of it anymore. And I actually look back at my career, and it was necessary from a monetary build your business standpoint. But now that I don't need that to keep my door open, if you're a parent out there and you're wondering what strength and conditioning your 8-year-old needs, it's called tag.
Yep.
It's called a monkey bar. It's free. I know you got to take a little bit of your time out while you're sitting there scrolling through your phone to sit at the park with your kid instead of at home, or dropping them off to basically the babysitter, which is their strength coach. But it's these things. Even if they play baseball or even if they play soccer or something, let them have free play with other kids. You develop the social skills. It's not structured. And also they're going to round out their fitness, because the play is dependent on everybody just doing what they do. And so that's the best way. If they are specific in a sport and you are hammering that from the beginning, I can do something to balance that out. But I've told parents before, I'm like, you do realize I'm just going to play with your kid for an hour. We're gonna make obstacle courses. We're gonna play the floor is lava. We're gonna do stuff like that. Floor is lava is a great game, by the way. If you really want a well-rounded kid, you just keep making that challenging to not step on the floor. They can be using upper body to climb on stuff. They can be doing balance work to jump from thing to thing. So floor is lava is one of the best games ever. But as I digress here, but when it comes to the adolescents, now we're getting a little bit, okay, so we are going to be knowing what their genetic predisposition is going to push them towards, what they like, what they're good at. And hopefully those two things go together, right? And that's normal because you're typically going to like things you're good at. And now, okay, so now they're going to start focusing on this because of just their attitude towards it. How do I make sure they stay a healthy kid in the process? And that's where I usually pick them up about 12 to 14 years old. Because they're starting to, hopefully they organically came to that decision on their own without a parent pushing them.
Yeah.
But even no matter the situation, it's my job to say, okay, so how do I get you through this growing phase healthy so you can be most successful at what you're doing, or at least not be broken in the process? And growth plates is important because if you bust a growth plate, if you crack a growth plate, you might actually stunt your growth. And it's really takes some negligence in the weight room to do that.
Right.
I
mean, so something pretty standard in most textbooks is to point out that the amount of force of impact on your joints from jumping off of a swing is like 3, 4, 5 times greater than would be if you were in here doing a squat. So it is something you need to be mindful of. But as I told this person when I was talking to her, I was like, look, yeah, that can happen. But my bigger concern is what is this teenage girl's training regimen? What was her base level of fitness when she got into powerlifting? And how is she training that she already has to come in and have a shoulder worked?
Well, that's part of the sport, though. So sports are not exactly healthy. We talk about throwing with the pitchers, but squat, deadlift, and bench. Well, when we talk about ratios, planning your programming, that bench is anterior stress. So you're going to get into that bad posture position. And a lot of people think deadlift's enough.
Yeah.
I love deadlifts and I love what they're good for. Complex movement. It's just standing up with resistance. It's something that's very functional because everybody has to reach down and pick something up at some point. But at the same time, when you're talking countering the anterior, the front squeeze of the pecs with back muscles, you need to be extending back. And you can get away with coming up and being in a bad posture position, even doing deadlifts, even though those need to be working, they're not working directly away. So almost wish powerlifting had like a barbell row or a pull up with weight kind of, although pull-ups can pull you into this position as well. Part of my mistake when I tore my pec, but some sort of pulling element other than just deadlifts would be kind of cool, or a croc row or something, but yeah, the nature of the sport, she's doing a lot of bench press. She's focusing on bench, probably doing it 3 times a week with 1 strength day, 1 technique day, 1 speed day or something. So she's being pulled into this position, and that massage therapist is kind of helping her work out of it. Now we're going to do a Saki and circle back a little bit on talking the science behind it, because you brought up a client with a heart issue, and I wanted to bring up 2 clients that actually, the fact that I came from a science background versus a training background benefited these 2 people. One where I did it on purpose and one where I did it accidentally. I started working at a company called Velocity Sports Performance back in 2008. And I got, because of lazy other coaches, I ended up heading all the fitness boot camps. What they call them boot camps. I hate the word boot camp, but that's another another story.
Marketing gimmick, another
Marketing gimmick, and the nature of what boot camps are is something that, again, is kind of a CrossFit model, which is it's overtraining for 8 weeks. So 8 weeks after you stop doing it, you remember how skinny you were when you did those 8 weeks of overtraining, which can't be sustainable.
Keeping in mind that boot camp comes from the military, where you're trying to overstress because it's literally life or death.
It's literally life or death, and you're actually mentally training these people as much as you're
getting yourself into swimsuit shape is not life or death.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it could be if you're overweight. We're talking long term.
It's entirely different.
But back to these clients. So I was in charge of these boot camps, and one of the ladies in there was. Let me start with actually what I was doing. So I took these boot camps, and they were so random when I got there. They were just whatever coach was scheduled for that day, did whatever they wanted to do. And that same coach wouldn't even do the same thing with every group. I would come in and be like, hey, what'd y'all do yesterday? And 5 a.m. would say this. So I would make my plan for the day. And then I get to 7 a.m. and they're like, oh, we did that yesterday. And I'm just like, but 5 didn't do that yesterday. They did something completely different. And these coaches were just throwing darts at the board, I guess. And it was the fitness class. Nobody cared. As long as they got sweaty, they were fine, right? So I was trying to put together a program. And luckily, because, again, other coaches didn't want to do that, I ended up doing them all. And so I was able to be in control of that program. And as we've discussed in the past, I'm a very unorganized person and not a control freak at all, but I knew how important it was in this situation. And so all of these things go into it. And again, my focus was bone density as I was finishing grad school while I was working here. And I was like, well, one thing we do know is rapid high force production is the best way to build bone density. So when that bone is stressed really fast, the osteoblasts form in that spot of stress and promote growth of bone, or the osteoclasts, which breaks down bone, go elsewhere, which if it is anywhere but the stress, it creates an electrical charge in there, and it attracts the good ones and pushes out the bad ones. And the best way to do that is rapid high force production. So things like a squat jump, deadlifts, broad jumps. So I was including all of these things into their programming in a way that was going to stress them to build better benefit. So about it seems 6 weeks is the magic number. 6 weeks later, one of the ladies pulled me aside, and she had gone to her doctor and had a bone density scan, and she was osteopenic, which technical term meaning you're 1 standard deviation away from good bone mass. So she was osteopenic. Everybody knows the word osteoporotic. That's 2 standard deviations away. And that's basically your brittle bone at that point. She was osteopenic. She had cancer. And she had breast cancer and had them removed. Well, I didn't know that because she had new ones put in place. And she was just another lady in my class. And it wasn't on her sheet or anything like that. And she had cancer, and cancer cachexia, one of the big side effects is loss of bone mass and loss of muscle mass. And so accidentally, I took somebody from being osteopenic to normal bone mass in 6 weeks because I wanted to focus on this thing that I knew was something that was healthy. Well, fast forward later, I got another client named Pam. Pam loves this show, so I'm going to go ahead and say her name. She, in her 60s, has a form of epilepsy that she doesn't have regular seizures all the time, but she is in a constant form of seizure. So it's just reaching down to grab something, she could fall over. And so obviously this is a one-on-one client. This is not somebody that can go into a regular group class and do everything. And we still train to this day. So we started 8 years ago, I think eight or so years ago, but 6 week mark, she went back to the doctor, had her bone density scan. She was osteoporotic when we started. So she was 1 fall away, which she was prone to do, from breaking a hip or a low back. And after 6 weeks, 11% increase in bone density. 11%. That's more than a tenth of what was there is increased, and no longer osteoporotic. She was in osteopenic. And over time, it slowed after that, the increase. But we are actually 8 years later, we're still normal bone density, and she's almost 70 years old. So
it's great that you Saki back here, because that's where I wanted to go, because that was one of the things I talked to this massage therapist about is, yeah, there are some dangers and concerns with this teenage girl doing powerlifting, but that's not to say weighted resistance is a bad thing. In fact, I'm a big advocate of when you can do it, and that's the big key, is when we talked about that when it comes to kids, younger people, of when can you do it. But when you can start lifting some heavier resistance, the sooner the better, especially for girls, because you want to start packing on that bone density, so that, because you will lose it. That's just life. You're going to lose it. But if you have a higher bone density to start with, and you maintain that that power and resistance training, it's going to degrade much slower, which is a big deal for women who are much more susceptible to osteoporosis.
well, think of these markers like finance. So when you're saving for retirement, you're putting money into the bank, so that way when you stop working, it lasts longer, and you hope it lasts at least as long as you live, right? Well, the same thing with muscle and bone mass is, we're not at the age where we can't put on more yet, but at some point we will be at that age. And then it's going to plateau for a second where we can't put on more, and we're trying to, no matter what we do, we're maintaining. And then it's going to get to a point that no matter what we do, it's going to go down.
Right.
And the more you have going into that naturally, the longer you're going to be on the tail end of that. And the goal is to be able to do this up until the point I die, right? I'm never spending time in a bed waiting to die, right? Or in a nursing home paying a lot of money to wait to die. So yeah, the goal is to be able to handle your own body in space until you die. And that takes prep. That takes a lot of prep work. And that's what kills me about these young kids that are already in categories that normally we would see in adults before, which was, the obesity category, the high blood pressure category, diabetics, all these
freaking upper cross syndrome in teenagers, because all they do is this.
Well, and it's not just this, it's sports too. When I see a 12-year-old that's already had rotator cuff surgery, that's something that's going to affect them the rest of their life. No matter how good the surgeon is, and no matter how good the rehab is, the fact that they had it is already still damage to their body. I'm going to have to deal with that down the road with my pec, because it is reattached to the bone, and it may get up to full strength, may not. It's definitely a setback. These 12 weeks I haven't been able to do anything with that is definitely going to pay dividends down the road, because I'm not getting any younger, right? So all of these things that happen to us when we're young, they play down the road. Just being fat as a kid, yeah, you may lose the weight later, but you already have the set points and the hormonal markers that go along with that. If you're a gymnast trying to be competitive and you mess up your hormones in puberty, that's the rest of your life. So again, the main point I wanted to bring was to be able to do these things, be competitive, be healthy for the rest of your life, takes a lot of literature, a lot of science. And I think some of these other scientists in other fields lose sight of that. And part of it is the fact that we're such an unregulated industry with so much crap in the industry that it gives a bias to anybody else that is an official STEM field looking in. My original degree going through was biochemistry, and I ended up graduating with a degree in physiology and biomechanics and a master's in the same thing. It's not kinesiology. Kinesiology is like the social studies of the social sciences versus the real sociology, right? And I think because there's that little bit, it's that easy access into our field, it dilutes the result, and everybody just looks at the crap.
Because it's most of what's out there.
Yeah. I would love to have a conversation with one. If anybody in the audience knows a podcast that is a STEM oriented podcast,
Yeah.
like Dark Horse Podcast, I would love to get on theirs because that would explode our viewership by a million. But at the same, and I'll just love to talk to those two individuals anyways. But I would love to discuss how what we do relates to what they do, and enjoy entertaining any of their questions. So if anybody in the audience has another one that they follow, pimp us up, or at least tell us where to go, because I would love to discuss this with other people.
Mhm. Yeah, and if you have some detailed scientific specific questions about health and nutrition and fitness science, then comment down below. If we weren't clear in what we were talking about, or if it made you think of something else, comment down below and we'll get to it.
Yeah, and like we say, like, share, subscribe. If you hit the dislike button, please leave a comment.
Yeah.
What did we do wrong? Or
are you just an a-hole?
Yeah, or you're just an a-hole. I actually appreciate the negative comments we get, because I've engaged with every single one of them as far as I can remember, unless I'm not getting a notification. Again, if it comes through as a social distillation, it's probably me, because I manage that YouTube account and I just don't switch back and forth to do comments. But yeah, I enjoy engaging with the negative comments, because not only with the banter with the person that made the comment, is other people are reading those and they may have wanted to say what that person said, and then they can get our response as well. So, and a lot of people sometimes look at the comments first before they listen to the whole video to see if it's something worth watching. And the more info they can have going into it, they might watch longer. So, but yeah, I think we're going to call it a day here.
Yep.
We're going to go, I got a turkey in the oven so we can get to our proteins.
We've got some football to watch because we love disappointment.
Yeah. Oh shoot, that game's probably in the fourth quarter by now. Although O-State won yesterday.
Go Pokes.
Go Pokes. All right, see you on the flip side, guys. We'll be back at each other's our normal setup next time, but this was fun.
Yep.